Hello and welcome to Vikings Territory Breakdown Podcast. I'm Joe Oberle from VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com. That's Mark Craig from the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. And woo-hoo-hoo-hoo, Victory Monday, Mark. Wasn't that a ball game? How about those Vikes? They're back on it. They're rolling. They're heading to the promised land. Yeah, Vikes. Yeah, baby. Go.
Yeah, okay. It does beat 1 and 5. Let's put it that way. If we talked about the defense and them facing Justin Fields and a Division II quarterback making his NFL debut, that's all good. The offense would be concerning a little bit, but this league is so often about being just less terrible than the team you're playing, and they achieved that this week. They were less terrible than the Bears.
Do you see? I mean, when you say that, are you talking about the league just in general, or just
the league in general?
Most of the teams are just.
I mean, it honestly is just about winning because, I mean, you knew it was gonna. I think if Deshaun Watson had played in the 49ers Browns game, I would have picked the Browns to win. But he's out. I figure there's no way. We had all crowned the 49ers the best team in the league. They were going to win the Super Bowl. It's all over. And it changed. It changes in on dime. And so you just have to win no matter what it is and just move on and get to the next week. And, now suddenly, next week doesn't look as awful as it did 2 weeks ago or last week.
Mark, did you lose a couple Survivor pools by chance?
No, I didn't lose any Survivor picks.
Oh, okay. All right.
I lost but the Bears, that was a public service announcement last week. Poor Kevin O'Connell had tried everything to get his team to win the turnover battle. So I took it upon myself that the only way that it could snap and they could win the game was to have a sports writer predict that they would lose the turnover battle and they would lose the game. So I did that on your behalf, Joe. And
all you do, Mark, is give.
I did it for the state of Minnesota because I knew if I made that pick, it wouldn't come true. So
you can put that on your resume to become one of us. I don't know.
Oh, I have a power of jinx when it comes to picking things like you wouldn't believe.
Well, thanks, Mark, for the win. For the people that wanted you to want the Vikings to tank, they're going to have their knives and pitchforks out for you.
That's true. Yeah, forgot about that.
There was nothing about this game that made me happy. I wanted them to win. I just want them to win, but it basically puts the Vikings, further away from a decent draft pick, but it doesn't really put them any closer to the playoffs because this is a 1-5 team, that was terrible, and their quarterback was confused. They were down 3 running backs, yet they did run over the Vikings defense. But, the Vikings have 2 wins over teams that have a combined record of 1-11. Good Lord. So they should have trounced them. They barely squeaked by. I mean, it's just like, come on, fellas. What the heck? You're a better team than this. We keep saying that. But I don't know if it's true, Mark.
Well, I mean, I just got done writing that it was not, not having Justin Jefferson was not an excuse for going 2 for 13 on third down against the worst third. Not only were they the worst third down defense in football, they were worse by 5 percentage points, which typically, when you get to that point, it's like everybody's kind of jumbled together, but they were head and shoulders above, not being able to stop anybody on third down. But having said that, they were without Jefferson. So
it really affected them, didn't it?
Well, it affected them, but also what's affecting them is the fact that TJ Hawkinson can't catch a ball anymore. Alexander Madison can't catch a ball. And even Addison, had that 30-yard pass, should have been a 35-yard pass that he drops.
Yeah, but he was kind of laying out for it,
but these guys have got, and all the drops on Hawkinson's behalf are contested ones that are hard thrown balls, but they got to catch them. That's what you're a first-round draft pick for. They're both first-round draft picks. One's making more than any other tight end in NFL history. So, these are plays that they are, expected to make. And
You're right. You're right.
And then KJ drops one. Granted, it was kind of a wide throw on third and 5. He has to lay out for it, and he drops it. So that affected him too. They should not have been 2 for 13 on third down, whether they have Justin Jefferson or they don't have it.
And they had what, how many 3 and outs in the second half?
They have 4 3 and outs out of 6 possessions. So.
Oh my goodness! How did they win this freaking ball game? Because they were playing the Bears. The Bears are bad, and I hate to break it to you, Vikings fans. The Vikings aren't much better. They're just not. I mean, they're not playing it. You sent me a note about Kirk not being as accurate this year as he has been in the past. I think that's true. He's had a lot of high throws. He's had a lot of missed shots. I mean, that one he did throw into Addison that he didn't catch was a beautiful pass. But, those were more commonplace last year. I'm just not seeing it as much this year. Kirk's is, I'm not saying he's all of a sudden 35 years old and feeling it, but he's not having the same season. Is that what you would say?
Well, statistically, except for yesterday, I mean, it's been a decent season. Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are some little more errant throws here and there, but and in knocking the Bears and everything, we also got to look at Brian Flores saw something that it's not a big risk, I don't think, to blitz and to go relentlessly after Justin Fields and also the rookie for sure. If I'm the Bears, I would have had him running a lot more than he did. It started off kind of like they get a sack, an easy sack on a 5-man rush right off the bat. I mean, Wonham sacks him without even being touched, but then he turns around and he runs for 17 yards, and it's like I thought we would have. And then 3rd and 4, he runs for a first down. I thought we might have seen more of that, but they kind of went away from that. But this is a guy that had two games in a row where he and DJ Moore were really on the same page, and they got out to a big lead. He was perfect in the first half against Denver. They just blew the lead in the second half. They beat Washington, who sleptwalked through that game. But they're not great. But this was a team that was kind of on a roll when it kind of finding some things. And to the Vikings' credit, they put him back where he was 3 weeks ago. And can this guy read a defense? Can this guy function at an NFL level?
Yeah. Going back to our quarterback just for a second, he is statistically, he's number 1 in touchdown passes, number 2 in yardage or something like that. But he had moments where he looked like he was the rookie on the other side of the field. I mean, that terrible decision to lateral to Akers, but he got away with it because by inches that it was out of bounds when the other guy recovered it. But, Kirk just still never looks comfortable in the pocket, even though, we've got an offensive line that has been called a top 5 offensive line. I'm not sure it is, but
it's not.
It's not, but he just doesn't look comfortable back there ever. And I don't know. I don't know if that's certainly not going to change with Kirk. I don't know. He still hangs in, gets hit, occasionally for sure. But sometimes he just looks panicked. And on that play, I was put it down on the Sandlot field, after the game if I was 30 years younger.
Yeah, that to me is kind of what Kirk is. Kirk is going to be a really good quarterback at times. He's also going to make some bad some bad decisions out of wanting to make something out of nothing. Whenever he makes that throw, I don't think he's anticipating getting hit as quickly as he did get hit.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't just turn and dump it to the guy. He turns and he's getting hit and the ball kind of comes out. That's one of those where, you'll hear it over and over and over and over again. I got to take the sack, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. Well, Kirk, you're in your 12th year or whatever, do it, and but that's just kind of that's the argument with Kirk is that you have that, but then you have great moments. You have, comebacks like last year, 8 comebacks and tying or setting a record. That's just kind of what you're dealing with. And that's also, frankly, why the Vikings are in limbo with what to do with him. They won't admit it, but the money, put your money where your mouth is. If you say all the things about Kirk, and then you don't extend him or you don't go that extra step with him again, then that tells me and that tells the world and Kirk that they're in the same boat as the rest of us, kind of like, well, what do we do with this guy? Good enough to win with, but isn't going to cover a lot of mistakes when they pop up.
Yeah. In defense of Kirk a little bit, and you mentioned it earlier, is the drops. I mean, you said KJ's dropping more this year. Madison has butter on his fingers. There's no two ways about it. I mean, he wants to turn and go downfield before he gets the ball in. I don't understand it. There's just too many of them. And you got Hockenson, who's something's going on there that I don't understand with him, because I mean, yes, these are all tough catches that he makes. He did have 5 on 6 or 7 targets, or so he did that. And I don't think they didn't use him early in the game when I thought they should have. But there's a lot of drops that aren't helping Kirk, and sometimes they're just as bad as the fumbles, because they can end drives on 3rd down.
Exactly, and that's the. You can chase your tail with Kirk. 2 people can get together and one likes Kirk and one hates Kirk, and they both can sit there and chase their tails all day long with yeah, but. And you're exactly right. I just got done saying things about that, but you're right. You take out some of these drops, and it's you've got another, instead of 180 yards, it's 280 yards. I don't know. It was offensively, it was just not good enough. And Madison, I like Madison, but Madison's a number 2. He's a number 2 back. He was not ever going to be Dalvin Cook. He's, and Dalvin Cook, they should not have kept Dalvin Cook, because you watch Dalvin now at the Jets and sort of at points last year with the Vikings, and he's reached that point where he's lost that step and he's not worth the money. So, but I would, and I think you sent a note about Akers or Madison.
Right.
I want to see more of Madison or Akers, because I feel like he's a more patient, smoother runner, doesn't force things as much, and I think he might be a better receiver. I believe Madison's. It's getting a little risky to throw the ball to Madison in situations where you need that.
He had a touchdown. He had a touchdown. If he grabs the ball and turns and then reads a block, he's in the end zone. And instead, he drops it, and they have to kick a field goal. I think it's happening week after week. Do you is KOC kind of like the a different version of Zimmer, whereas he doesn't want to get new acquisitions into the offense until they've been assimilated for a few weeks? We finally saw Dalton Reisner, but I mean, he should have. I mean, Akers knows most of this offense from playing with the Rams. He should be in there more than he's in. I guess I don't know why they're not using him more, especially when you see some of these issues with Madison. Madison's running hard, but in crucial situations, he's messing up.
Well, I think they did use him a couple of weeks ago, and pretty well. I figured that was a nice mixture that they had. It all runs together now, but was it the Carolina game? Where there was a nice mix between the two of them. I don't know. Some of it's game plan, some of it's maybe how they practice. I'm not sure, but I would like to see more of because Madison's he's not a primary workhorse. There's only one workhorse back left in the league, and Derrick Henry, and that's because he's bigger than a sequoia tree, and he can still get things done. But even then, Tennessee has a second guy, Spears, that
Najee Spears,
that they're using, as a nice change of pace. But I think Akers it's begging for like a little bit more of Akers, and I feel like he's smoother. He lets things develop in front of him a little better, and can, whereas Madison is just a sledgehammer into whether there's a hole or not. And this guy's maybe a little bit more patient runner.
Yeah. Speaking of the offensive line, they only gave up 2 sacks to the petrified Kirk Cousins, but they only had 46 rushing yards. That's just not going to get it done. We saw Ezra Cleveland go down and Dalton Reisner come in, and I think by all accounts that I've read that he had a pretty good showing. but I don't know what your thoughts are on that. You know, what do you say about the offensive line? Did they have a good game or a bad game? Where they probably weren't as tested as they're going to be on Monday night. But
well, I think when you spend the second half only gaining two first downs and going 4 3 and out, the offensive line, I would start looking there. You know, there's drops, but also the offensive line. I would start looking at, you know, they didn't, you know, they got physically, you know, beat. I would say the Vikings are they're a talented team, but they're not the physically strong team that you're Philadelphia or San Francisco that's going to line up and you know, or Cleveland now. My goodness, what Cleveland's doing defensively is, I mean, they're just a powerful, physically intimidating type team right now. Vikings don't have that club in their bag. So, but and as far as Reisner, you know, he played 10 snaps, and 6 of them were after that ridiculous interception that basically clinched the game. And granted, I think they did get a first down actually after that interception, so they did, you know, run the ball a couple times. But you know, it's a 10 snap window and there was nobody that threw him aside, or so I would imagine he did okay. But
yeah,
he clearly hasn't. That's kind of a confusing, baffling. You know, why do you go out and pay a veteran to do this, and then granted, if someone gets hurt, he's there, and you can plug him in. Then we'll be singing a different tune. But I think, you know, they're still wrestling with Ingram. You know, sometimes he looks good, especially running the balls, and a lot of times he looks bad, especially when they're pass protection. But clearly hasn't done enough to get replaced yet.
How bad was Cleveland hurt? Any idea?
I don't know. I mean, everything was just so preliminary, you know, last night with
Do we know what it was? I didn't even know what the injury was.
He just limped off. I'm not sure what it was.
Okay. You know, on the bright note, and it isn't very, very bright. They did have a nice touchdown drive at the end of the first half when I was sitting here with my brother watching the game. He's saying they're not going to get anything. I said, I think they'll get in position for a field goal. And all of a sudden, suddenly they're racing downfield and getting in position for a nice touchdown, a good pass to Addison, who ran a decent route to get pretty wide open there. You know, it's only one touchdown for the offense. The defense in both of their wins has come through with a defensive score that's helped them win. You know, we'll talk about that in the next segment. But what'd you like about that touchdown drive right before half? And is there anything there that we can be hopeful about with this squad, this offense?
Well, I like it for a lot of reasons. Is because you know, so we're sitting here just beating the crap out of them for all what they did in the second half, not being able to run the ball, not being able to go convert on third downs. But the highlight was, you know, that drive starts when Danielle Hunter shoves the running back into the quarterback, and he throws that thing that wobbles up in the air, and Hicks comes down with it. So, you know, clock management. I mean, it's at a point where, you know, this team, you know, we're just coming off a game where, you know, they had to delay a game on 4th and 7 or whatever it was. They mismanaged their timeouts against the Chiefs and all that stuff. Well, this drive starts with a takeaway, which is what they've been needing, is, you know, get to take the ball away, and then they work it down to where I think they scored with 12 seconds left. So that's good. The moving down the field, clock management, getting the ball out of bounds, and stuff. You know, that was really good 2-minute offense. And then Addison has like a veteran move where he really fakes the going inside and then cuts to the outside, and then Kirk puts it right on in between 2 defenders. So, you know, there's a lot to like about that, because, you know, and you're in a slogfest with a team that you're clearly better than, you know, and you, at a key moment, you took the ball from them and you scored. And then I believe they got the ball to start the second half too.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, that was a lot to like about that series.
Speaking of the slugfest, I was down there for this game last year at Soldier Field, the final game of the season. And the only difference between the 2 games was the Bears wanted to lose. This one they didn't, and Vikings had a little more tough time with them. Well, let's Let's take a quick break and cleanse our palate and talk about the defense, which played a little bit better. The offense, the offense has been kind of spiraling down. It's fascinating that they've looked better in all their losses than they have in these 2 wins. The offense, it's like, how do you figure this? I mean, I don't know what to think. Maybe let's regroup and see if Mark has an answer to that question when we come back. Come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. All right, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown Podcast with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Mark, I asked before we ended the last segment, what's up with a team that looks better in 4 losses than they do in their 2 wins? I mean, and that's not an exaggeration. There were times when they did look, not because they looked great in those losses, but they looked better than we've seen in these two wins. Are they playing down to their opponents? What's that mentality that causes that?
Well,
you got to know this.
Basically, Joe, in this league, they're kind of all the same. I think Royce mentioned something about he gave them too much credit. He said there's 20 teams in the middle. I would say there's probably 30 teams. I don't know. You just look at what happened on week 6, and like I was telling you off air here, that this was in honor of Sid Hartman. This was the week. This was an example of the week where Sid would go to Winter Park and sit there and for 5 minutes be asking a question about it's a crazy league. It's a crazy league. How do you figure 49ers lose to Cleveland and Jets beat Philadelphia? So yeah, they look bad. They may look better in a loss than they look terrible in a win. But ultimately, and in Vikings fans, especially the Kevin O'Connell era, everything's a 1-score game. And we found out last year it was all happy days and until the end. And then they win them all. And then this year they lose them all except they win the Chicago game. And again, I guess for this game in particular. It's getting used to Justin Jefferson. What the defenses that they saw were much different without Jefferson on the field. Doesn't excuse the drops, doesn't excuse the inability to run the ball. But yeah, it's just every game is kind of its own thing, and it's just one big jumble, and it ends up who makes the plays toward the end. And in both wins, it's been the defense making the plays that we're not seeing when they've lost games.
Maybe it's a perception deal from fans. I think you get caught when you look at Major League Baseball, 162 games. You can see trends. You can see ups and downs and waves and runs and just really bad play for a long time. Where with a 17-game season, you don't have that. You can't, a team can reel off some wins in a row, but then they can come up and just get beat, on any given Sunday. It's maybe we're thinking that you should be able to look at it and say this about the team when in fact you can't make any assumptions. I'm going to still say that San Francisco and Philadelphia are the cream of the crop, even though they got knocked off by 2 teams that, that they're pretty good and they were supposed to be pretty good before their record didn't show it. So maybe it's our perception that doesn't take it, like you just said, each week, each game is a thing on its own, and it's such a battle. And so you can't maybe make these overarching sweeping statements about a team so easily as you might in an 82 game hockey season or a 162 game major league season.
I mean, a 3-game losing streak in football is a 30-game losing streak in baseball.
That's right there, yeah.
Well, but yeah, the 49ers got as close as you can get to being that team that you look at and say, no matter what happens, they're the better than the team that they're playing. They're moving at such an efficiency. But in saying that, it's a violent game. Baseball, unless you're the Twins, I guess, and they get hurt every time they stretch. But we'll do a Twins podcast on that, and I think people can beat me up for that one. But but to me, it's Oh, what were we talking about?
Just the whole trend of,
Yeah.
overarching, you said unless
Oh,
it's
yeah, yeah. So the 49ers, senior moment, two weeks in a row.
you're not
But yeah,
getting younger.
you throw in the violence of the game, and okay, so the 49ers are at that point. I was right there with them. That is even more, way more so than Philadelphia. The 49ers were the best, but then they go into a game. Christian McCaffrey, who makes that whole thing go offensively, has an oblique injury. Debo Samuel, who's probably, I'd put maybe number 2 on making that thing go. The quarterback in that situation is probably, I mean, the fact that he can just sit there and distribute it is amazing. But if he didn't have all those guys to do it to and a great offensive line, he wouldn't be anything special. So you lose 2 of those guys, and then they lose the game. So you have the fact that everyone's kind of all the same, and then if someone does peek their head out of the above everyone else, then the injuries ultimately bring them back down to that level. So you honestly, the people that want to give up and tank before you're mathematically eliminated, or at least before Thanksgiving, are crazy, because they're just not paying attention to how quickly you can get back in it and how quickly things change.
That's a great point. We need to bottle that for next week after we lose to the 49ers, if that's what the case, because then the calls for tanking and collapsing for Caleb are going to be even higher, and they're going to be ruining this game. But before we go down that road, we got to give the defense some props. The defense has slowly but surely, improving this season over last season for sure. And they finally won the turnover battle. They made 3 turnovers yesterday, 2 interceptions, and I think fumble recovery. Is that correct? And the Vikings still had a fumble, but the Vikings defense basically won that game. How you mentioned earlier how they confused Justin Fields. He was struggling with what Flores was throwing at him. He had 5 sacks on the team, 2 of them from Daniil, who has 8 sacks in 6 games, which is pretty goddamn good pace. So quit talking about trading this guy. And Byron Murphy with a pick. That was a gift pick. But for this team, I'll take it. So talk about the defense in general and what you saw from them, and you think they're ascending right now, and they're going to keep improving.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that they played well enough to beat the Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I thought that was a decent game plan against them. The Chiefs, granted they converted a lot of third downs, but that's what they do. That's how they, but they, like going back to the Chiefs game, that 3rd and 18 coming out of halftime, that's just an inch away from being an all-out rush, which you hate to do against him because he can beat you. And then it's just Cam Bynum, leaps just an inch away from maybe tipping that ball away. The approach is good. I think that Flores is getting better as he's learning his personnel. In today's NFL, you don't get to play, you don't get to practice in the preseason. You got to practice again, joint practices and practices where no one hits each other. So he's kind of learning his personnel. The Philadelphia game was whenever they just ran the ball. He didn't make a whole lot of adjustments. But in looking back at it, it's maybe his approach was to not give up a lot of big plays. And one thing they've done is they've managed to blitz, relentlessly in some cases. Like yesterday, I don't know what the percentage was, but it had to be high. And they've managed to not give up a ton of big plays. Now, a team like Carolina didn't even try to throw the ball deep. Chicago gets that 39-yard gain, and then a couple plays later, they're crawling into a shell and playing for a 53-yard field goal. So, I think yes, the defense I think is getting better. And what I would like if I was a Vikings fan is if you're not thrilled about this year, and you think that maybe Flores will be back next year, can the front office give him more personnel? Because you're not, Daniel's not going to come back, I'm sure. But can you end up giving him more personnel And Davenport hurt his other ankle yesterday, so I would imagine he's
really
gone.
It's his other ankle. My goodness, he's worse than Byron Buxton.
So yeah, I would imagine that he's not going to be around, and that's going to be that'll be a big blow because we found when this guy was healthy, he sure surprised me and a lot of other people on how violent a pass rusher he could be in this system.
You think Daniel's gone?
Yeah, I would imagine he's gone. I would assume they're gonna have to pay Justin Jefferson, and then they've already paid Hawkinson, and then Kirk. Depending on what you do with Kirk, Daniel's not going to come back on some. If Daniel gets 15, 16, 17 sacks, and he can't be franchised, so I would imagine you got to expect him to move on.
Well, then you got to trade him because, I guess you'd get a compensatory pick if he signs with somebody else. But what would that pick be? Maybe a second rounder, or probably a third rounder, but dreaming for a second rounder. But, you should trade him then, I guess, if you're really that sure he's not going to be back next year.
Well, it's not my call, Joe. I don't know if you know that. It's my guess. It's not my call.
Yeah, I know. I just that disheartens me because it's fun to watch a pass rush. He's healthy, and I'm confident in his health. And with Davenport out there who is not healthy, it's a formidable pass rush again. It can make up for a lot of problems we might have in the interior defensive line. It's just fun to have that to see after last year, to see a Vikings defenders harassing opposing quarterbacks.
Not only just replacing him, but it's also finding, other players. I mean, it goes along with this conversation is that Lewis Cine yesterday. I know we beat that Lewis Cine drum forever, but he was a healthy scratch for the first time in his career. So,
oh my goodness,
that to me is this gigantic red flag about do they have the front office that can replenish the players? And we'll see. We'll see what it's going to play out over time.
Well, a couple other players I need to shout out to that I have been really impressed with this year. I mean, I liked them last year, and I was always thinking Josh Metellus, was hoping he was going to get better. I liked Hicks last year, but I didn't like him as much as I do this year. I mean, he's having a great year, and he had a great game yesterday. He had the pick. He had a pass defended, I think. He and Metellus and Cam Bynum were the top tacklers yesterday, and the three of them are playing just great. And there are three players you can build around. Now, maybe isn't that why Cine's not playing? Because he's not better than Bynum or
well, of course.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that when you're given a crack in the first round and you trade down 20 spots and you take a guy who's not good enough to get on the field, that's concerning. And Metellus, those guys have been around a little while, and Metellus, he's a starter. I mean, he's on the field all the time. He fits what Flores likes to do, and it's a constant pressure situation. And so he makes a great play, and the ball goes up in the air. Hicks catches the ball, and Hicks had some plays last year, I think, early on, especially where there's a little more like nastiness to him than what you see. He's very gentle kind of guy, personality wise, and he's a good player. He's he's not all pro material, not a Pro Bowler, but he's a solid player.
Great scoop and score yesterday.
He moved pretty well. They said he celebrated his 32nd birthday last week, and he moved pretty good. He scooted down the sideline pretty good with that. So,
we're not hearing the name of at least this week. We didn't hear much. I saw one play by Ivan Pace, but him and Asamoah, we don't hear much about them lately. What's the reasoning there?
Well, I mean, I don't. Ivan Pace is not going. I don't think is going to be a guy that's you're going to see a lot of flash plays from. A lot of he's very undersized, but he's a good football player. Asamoah was on the field least in the second half, making some, some blitzes. And yeah, that's Pace is on the field because first of all, he's much better than an undrafted player. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Asamoah got hurt in the training camp and never really took that leap that we were all expecting of him. And they didn't want Kendricks around anymore. So there wasn't any, there wasn't a big playmaker that they drafted high or whatever to take over that position.
Yeah. Well, how about the secondary? You got to give them some plaudits as well. They bottled up DJ Moore, who the previous week had 230 some yards receiving. Just lit it up against Washington, and that didn't materialize. I think he had 2 targets in the first half, 1 catch or something like that. So they did a number on him, didn't they?
Yeah, I would probably give a bigger nod to the pressure. It's all rush and cover. Without one, you can't really do the other. So the rush and cover helped. I would say that even better than his game clinching interception and 3 passes defense was 3rd and goal at the 4, first half. You can tell that Fields wants to go to Moore, but Byron Murphy has got him, taken care of in the corner of the end zone. And then, Fields, I think there were times on that game. One was a Daniil sack where I think he felt like he could kind of, look around and still have time to get away from him. Well, he tried to run on that, and that's when Harrison Phillips and Hicks, Hicks didn't get credit for that stop, but he and Phillips both stop him for no gain. And I think Phillips got a 0-yard sack on that play. And then the other one was a 3-man rush in the second half, I believe, where Daniil, that might have been the one. Yeah, there was a play where he hurt his wrist. He thinks he can get away from Daniil, and Daniil's on top of him right away. And he tries to throw it out of bounds, but his knee was down. So, yeah, the defense did a good job on Moore. I think he only had 1 catch for 7 yards in the first half, like 5 for 51 overall, but he was a non-factor after being a breakout. He was the first guy since Randy Moss in 2007 to 5 games his first 5 games with a new team, having 500 yards and 5 touchdowns in the first 5 games. So he went from that to being just a nobody in this game, and a lot of that was the rush, and also Murphy did a good job on it.
You brought up tanking earlier. I don't think that the team's going to tank. We've said it ad nauseum. They got Brian Flores, who's in the midst of a lawsuit about tanking, and we know where he stands on it. The teams don't tank, but what you can do is have a fire sale. And there's all kinds of talk before the trade deadline comes of trading these veterans like Harrison Smith and Daniil Hunter, and they say Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins would never allow a trade to happen. So that's just silly talk. But do you think the Vikings are going to do that at some point? They could have the excuse of, well, Daniil's not coming back anyway, so we got to get someone else. So then we also unload Harrison Smith, who took a cut to stick around. And I guess with that question, I'm asking, if Brian Flores comes back last year, wouldn't maybe someone like Daniil Hunter want to continue to play for him after the season he's having so far? And clearly Harrison Smith does. And some of these guys are ascending on the defensive side of the ball. And if you keep Flores, they might want to be back and to play with him. I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that? And I know what you saw on Saturday from Caleb Williams. It's not much of a guy to tank for, is he? There you go.
Well, that was the first time I really sat down and watched him play, and he looked awful, and they looked awful. And I'm not just saying it's a one game that I watched.
Yeah, I know.
You know how the narrative gets going. It's a runaway train, and suddenly it becomes he's the next Peyton Manning, or he's the next this or that. And it's like, sometimes there's not truth to all this stuff. And you watch, and watching that game, I was like, I didn't see anything special that he did, and I think you would want that from a guy, in that situation. he's, granted he's on the road, but he's he's got the better team. He's playing an inferior opponent, and not that they're a terrible team, but he looked pretty bad. What, 3 interceptions in the first half?
Yeah.
But, anyway. To me, a fire sale is tanking. I mean, you're not going to go out and the first touchback. There's no kickoffs anymore. It's an opening touchback, and just sit on the and suck your thumb on the 50-yard line and let them run past. No one's ever going to just lay down. And
the Bears did last year in Soldier Field. I watched it.
Well, literally, like you just put in players that. Like maybe I don't know why the Bears would tank, but because they got
#1
pick and they got their own pick, and it would be typical Bears, or if they had the #1 pick, they didn't take they didn't take Stroud or Bryce Young this year, and then they because they have all this faith in Justin Fields, and then they take a quarterback next year, and Williams maybe is not as good as the other guys. I don't know. But yeah, if you start selling off players, that's equivalent of tanking, and so I think that if I'm the Vikings, and my guess is that you win that game, you turn on the tape of the 49ers, you realize that even if McCaffrey plays, Deebo Samuels plays, they got injuries that they're not going to be as lights out as they've been the first 5 weeks, and then it's you win that game, and then suddenly it's an entirely different ball game. It's entirely different, from what we're talking about just 2 weeks earlier. So, that's where their heads are. I would say, I agree. I don't think Kirk would, would Kirk let himself go to New York and,
nope.
And then, and Rodgers is there. Rodgers has intentions to come back next year. And the fact that, you're not just going to arrive in New York and all of a sudden be, a savior, and
right.
You got a new system and everything. It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I might feel like the Vikings' head is in, scratch out. You scratch out. It's a Monday night game at home, and the 49ers are banged up.
You got to put on a good show for that one. It's national TV. It's where Kirk shines. What? Wait, what? Oh, anyway. Yeah, you're right. I just can't see it happening. I can see if things go south, they might consider getting something for Danielle before they lose him. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? But it's just speculation to think about. One thing that I did want to mention, because he's one of the star offensive players, is Greg Joseph. Made a 51 and a 53-yarder, missed a 57-yarder. He had plenty of leg for it, but. And so he's having a pretty good season, but of course, like the Vikings, when he's having a good game, they have to have a PAT blocked, which was concerning for a little bit in this game, unfortunately. But anyway, just mention him. And any thoughts on the season he's having? Because there's no pressure for him. He hasn't hardly even kicked this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's been times where you're thinking, oh, is this going to be where we hear the goalpost go, because he was had an amazing ability. They should give him like 2 points for consistently hitting the upright like he was doing last year with those PATs. But yeah, the less you hear about your kicker, the less you hear about your left tackle, your long snapper is the better. So not hearing a lot about Greg Joseph, because he's just knocking it through. 57-yarders in Chicago are not. If you miss those, we're not beating you up too much for that. So the fact that he made was there 2 50-yarders yesterday?
Yep, 51, 53. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, normally Chicago, the field looked fine. The weather didn't look that bad. So to me, it's like. Typically, if you make a couple 50-yarders in Chicago, you've done something pretty amazing. And so, yeah, they needed him. In these one-score games, they need him to like not fall off the rail and keep doing what he's doing.
The Vikings have won 4 in a row in Chicago. Kirk Cousins owns the Bears.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, on that sarcastic note, let's take a quick break here because Mark is starting to do sound effects. So I don't know what's up with that, but I did like it. Let's come back and talk about the 49ers coming to town and what we see happening there and anything else we saw around the league. Crazy week. So come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune. Ultimately, final thought for the Vikings. I mean, that game was just blah yesterday. Like you said, I don't know. It doesn't mean anything unless they come back and win on Monday night against the 49ers. And that is a tall task to undertake. Anything can happen in this league, Mark. You mentioned the 49ers getting beat by Cleveland, which isn't after when you consider their defense isn't so outlandish, but they did it with a backup quarterback. And you got Zach Wilson, who was a backup quarterback this year, beating the Eagles and giving them their first loss. Then you got the Buffalo Bills, who should have been beaten last night, right? They ended up winning that one, right? So what all these one-score games, Vikings, maybe the Vikings, they're all copying the Vikings from last year. They created so much excitement with all those one-score wins, and comebacks. So maybe that's what the league wants, and that's what they're telling the players to do. Tank till the last 2 minutes like basketball, just sleepwalk through it, and then get exciting for the fans to tune in the red zone to pick it all up. All right, go ahead, Mark.
Well, that's what the league has wanted since Pete Rozelle in the 60s. I mean, that's what they've mastered. That's why they own the sports landscape. There's 10 of the 13 or 11 of 14 games were one-score games in the fourth quarter, and 9 of them were decided by one score, and that's it. We could say that just about every week. I know there were some blowouts earlier this season that were uncharacteristic, like 70-20 and stuff like that. But typically the league is what the Vikings have been through the last 2 years, league wide. So it's the Browns beating the 49ers with PJ Walker, who was in Chicago as their backup from March until August, and then they cut him. And so I think PJ Walker would have been a lot more dangerous for the Vikings to face had he walked in and replaced Justin Fields than a guy from Shepherd University, a D2 school in West Virginia, making his NFL debut. So just the way the league changes.
What's that a product of? I mean, are there rule changes that have made these? Because remember you don't, but I do, how many times the Vikings would get blown out in the Super Bowl, and blowouts in the Super Bowl were the norm back then. And there were the haves and have-nots clearly back then. It has been gradually coming together. What is that? What's bringing that about? I think
I think it's been like that for decades now.
Yeah.
But the draft, it's the waiver wire system, the draft system, the salary cap, everything is geared toward keeping everyone, that's why the teams that rise above and become like the dynasties, and, the Chiefs right now, I don't know how many people call them a dynasty, but they're in the middle of a dynasty.
Yeah.
You tend to look back on it, but you win 2 in 4 years. You go to 3 in 4 years.
They've been in the AFC Championship for like 5
years in a row hosting. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has never played a road playoff game.
Really?
Except for the neutral site Super Bowls. He's been at home. He's never played a road playoff game. So that says a lot about, and look where he is, at 28 in his career. He's already considered a Hall of Famer, and the guy hasn't played a road playoff game. But that's just the way the league is. And but the way that you do that is when you're put at the bottom of the pile of every round, and you have to draft 30th or in each round, and you have a system where you what fits your system. You don't blow a lot of draft picks, and you just keep stocking the shelves with cheap labor that's pretty good players, and you have the great quarterback, and that makes a big difference. So
Mark, another product of that, what we're describing, this where the teams are all more similar and the blowouts aren't as great. Is maybe that? I mean, you have said that, you said at the beginning of the year that, you know what, you have 6 teams not making the playoffs this year that made them last year. Every year it's been 4 teams change places each year from
At
year
least
to year.
4. At least 4
Yeah.
for 33 years now. Yeah.
And I just, and not to see, you know, to say anything against your picks or make you, you know, I don't bring it up for that. I just think it's fascinating just to check in and see where we're at. I mean, already the Vikings look to be being replaced by the Lions. The Giants were in the playoffs last year and they're not going back there. What do you think, you know, a kind of what you thought at the beginning of the year, how's it going, and where it might end up in that, you know, idea of a bunch of teams that weren't in the playoffs all of a sudden getting in, and some teams that were there last dropping out. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you because each year whenever I set out to do some preseason preview stuff, I have an editor send me, yeah, I forget what I did last year, send me, and then I look through it and I go, ouch, ooh, that doesn't look good. So yeah, it's fun to do, and you obviously, to me, making a prediction, it's no fun to predict. Like, I think the Chiefs will make the playoffs this year. You know,
Right.
boring. So you kind of reach, and one of the teams, obviously, that was not going to come true. I said one of the new teams in the playoffs would be Carolina, because Carolina was in a horrendous. You know, the Buccaneers won that division last year at a 7-9 or 7-9 record, was it? Or I don't know what it was. You know, 8-9. Sorry, 8-9. You know, the league has now got 18 or 17 games. So I figured, you know, and Carolina was right there. And I thought, you know, Carolina's defense was played well. They had the interim coach went 6-6, I believe.
Yeah.
But what you don't see is that they, you know, devastated, a bunch of injuries on defense, and then obviously the quarterback needs a little bit more time. So you know, they're not going to make the playoffs. But yeah, like teams that made the playoffs last year that, you know, I thought maybe Miami would take a step back. Well, Miami has put the foot to the floor, and they're, you know, although they were down 14-0 to Carolina to open up, I was getting a little worried about that one. That's my survivor pick. But yeah, there's, you know, the Jets, I thought everybody was saying, well, the Jets will be one of the new teams in the playoffs. They've been 12 years without being in the playoffs, longest in the league. And what's cool about their situation is that might still happen. I mean, they're 3-3.
Their defense.
They win that game. They beat the Eagles. Not only are, you know, Zach Wilson obviously is a quarterback, but they didn't have Sauce Gardner. They had another defensive guy that didn't play. So, you know, that's almost like when you lose an Aaron Rodgers on the 4th snap of the season, and everybody's like immediately, oh, trade for Kirk Cousins and give up and do this and do that. And the Jets are kind of circling the wagons a little bit and saying, you know, we still got a good team. Maybe this quarterback, you know, he's got talent if he just develops, you know, and through the season. And that's really cool to see them at 3-3 now. And maybe they get into the playoffs without Aaron Rodgers. And
they have beat some decent quarterbacks. You know, that defense. They have done so. And you and I were kind of talking offline and saying, it wouldn't hurt us at all to see the Jets make the playoffs and do well with Aaron Rodgers on the sidelines, you know.
Yeah, but you know, from someone that likes, you know, it's the ultimate team sport, and it's a cliche of all cliches, but it's true. You know, Aaron Rodgers, if you were to take him to the playoffs, and you know, if he wins the Super Bowl, then obviously he deserves the lion's share. But you know, he didn't step into a terrible team, just like Tom Brady didn't step into a terrible Tampa team a couple years back when they won the Super Bowl.
Right.
You know, that was a great defense. The Jets have a great defense, and it's kind of be nice to see them be able to make the playoffs with a Zach Wilson who, you know, I don't know if Zach Wilson, you know, there's certain it factors that quarterbacks have, and I don't think he has it, but that doesn't mean he's terrible. He's not I don't think he's ever going to be a great quarterback, a guy worthy of the 2nd pick in the draft, but he can win, and the defense is really good, and it'd be kind of neat to see them, you know, make the playoffs without Aaron Rodgers.
Bottom line is, we can't make any assumptions yet on these teams. Things can change And Mark, you were already saying that earlier in the podcast that Vikings fans hold on just a little bit yet. If they do, in fact, win next Monday night against the 49ers, it is a total different outlook on this team in this season because their schedule lightens up a little bit after that. They got a bunch of NFC North games coming. They are 1-0 in the NFC North for what it's worth. So we shouldn't do that. But that said, the Niners are coming in after a loss, their first loss this season. They're going to be ticked off. They're a little banged up, but they're still pretty tough on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that's going to present some problems for the Vikings offense and Kirk Cousins in the pocket and under the spotlight of Monday Night Football. So what are your thoughts on this game coming in?
Yeah, I mean, to me, with the whole Kirk in prime time stuff, just those numbers just kind of go in one ear and out the other ear for me because I've seen him play, and I always bring this up. The Rams game in his first year or whatever it was, 2000, gosh, was it 19 now or whatever? They go there and Kirk is outstanding, but Jared Goff had a perfect passer rating for the entire game and threw like 4 touchdown passes and just had his way with Zimmer's defense.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most, Zimmer, has said that one of the most embarrassing games he's had in his coaching career was that Monday night game. That wasn't Kirk's fault. Kirk was going toe-to-toe with a guy who had a perfect passer rating and lost that game. So that gets lumped in with his losses. Kirk's also had wins like Carolina, not prime time, but he's also had wins where he didn't play that well and the defense played really well. So a lot of that's and
I bring it up facetiously, Mark, but I also on this side of that coin, the dude does panic and pressure gets to him in either imagined pressure or actual pressure. He gets both. So I
would say if you're playing on Monday night, I mean the Thursday night games are different because everybody plays on Thursday night. It could be a terrible matchup, but if you're playing on Monday night, typically you're playing a good defense, a good team, and maybe that adds to the he's not handling the pressure. But I don't think it's the pressure. It's the pressure of what the defense is giving him, not the pressure of I'm playing at night. I don't see that. Looking at this game, this is a good example of how, when you look down the road and you say, well, the schedule gets easier, the schedule gets harder or whatever. This game, by the fact that Christian McCaffrey is hurt, Deebo Samuel's hurt, we don't know what the extent is, but I would say they'd be limited at best if they play.
Get an extra day to heal.
If they don't play, that changes the complexion of that game tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. It's the defense that will win the game for them. I think that it sure makes if Brian Flores doesn't have Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey to worry about, or if they're proved to be not up to par health wise,
mm-hmm.
then that certainly helps his attack, and they'll be able to make Brock Purdy look human, which is the Browns did for the first time in the guy's career, except when he hurt his elbow.
Yeah, that was his first loss, right?
His first regular season loss, and then obviously they lost in the playoff game when he got hurt, and the 49ers were down to no one. But things change, in the league, and so this game is much more winnable, especially being at home. But I still feel like there's two factors. One's the defense, and two is the we're pissed off factor of they lost. Now you're going to get their full attention. So right. Yeah, I after my public service announcement last week of taking the Bears and creating this win and ruining your tanking, I'm going to just play it. I'm not going to outsmart myself. I'm going to just say the 49ers win this game. A low-scoring, close game, though, I believe.
Well, you accuse me forever and a day on this prediction segment of being a homer and always, outlandishly picking the Vikings, in which served me well last year since they were 13-4 and I won. I am going to enjoy my fortitude, a 3-3 lead for another week, and go with you. I just think that the defense is too physical for the Vikings. You know, they have not. The Vikings have not looked not certainly not dominant, but not confident. You know, I think this will be a tough spot for them. They're going to read the headlines, and it's the 49ers. Brian Flores could make some trouble for a young quarterback for sure, but this guy is playing above his years, Brock Purdy. I think one of those two guys, McCaffrey or what's his face, Sam Debo's, what's his last name? Debo. Thank you. He will be back. One of those guys will be back. If it's Christian McCaffrey, I don't think it's and he's healthy. It's the Vikings are going to get beat pretty bad, but I think it'll be a good game like you. I think in the end, the Niners are a little tougher than the Vikings yet. They haven't shown it, so it's going to go for the Niners, and that's not I'm not stepping out on a limb there.
I will add that not only defense, but offensive line. I mean, I think the best player in the league might be their left tackle. I mean, that guy is a force, and not that that they can't get pressure on this guy, but that offensive line is top notch. You've thrown out the Vikings being a top 5 here and there. I don't believe that. Not that they got some good tackles, but I wouldn't put them as a top 5 offensive line. I would put San Francisco, Philadelphia, Detroit. Those are elite offensive lines. That's another reason why I would go with the 49ers would be, but I think if they have those injuries, then it's a closer game, more of a close contest. But defense, offensive line,
yeah,
I go with the 49ers.
They got Bosa to contend with, right? So there we have it. That'll do it for this week. Come on back next week. We're taping this week on Monday because Vikings played yesterday, but next week they'll be playing on Monday night, so we'll probably wait till Tuesday to tape this. And so come on back and check out. We can talk about the Vikings-Niners game and everything else going on. Thanks, Mark Craig. Thanks, Mike Walden behind the scenes. Thanks, folks, for checking us out. And thanks, Joe Johnson. So until next week, when hopefully we're talking about a Vikings win, we'll see ya. Skol.
Skol.